In this segment, we're going to talk about using CSS and color. I've already got an example up here on the screen, and I've adjusted just one of the colors within the document. You can see right here as I point to any of these are links, the links change color. And these aren't the traditional colors of links according to the default style sheet, which would be blue and purple. So you'll notice down here in the CSS, I've got an A selector for anchor, and I've set the color to black. That's also along with the text decoration set to none, which causes the links not to have underlines. So if we look at how the anchor tags are used, here's an anchor tag right here around the very text that you see, Design for Coders, which links it to the Design for Coders course. So we've also got our pseudo selectors for the anchor tags, link, visited, and hover. And here in hover, which means your mouse is pointing at the element, we've got gray right there. So you'll notice here when I created the colors, I simply said we want black. Now that works for all of the common colors, black, yellow, green, and so on. But let's say we wanted to change the color of all of, for example, the authors. So the authors are in the H3 tag, and there's a couple of different ways we can look at color from an HTML CSS perspective. So colors on the screen are known as RGB colors, and that stands for red, green, and blue. And we can set a value for red, green, and blue between 0 and 255, 0 being all the way off, and 255 being all the way on. So with this CSS rule that I've set here on line 16, we're saying that the H3 tags, which are our authors, Joseph Caserto, myself, and so on, those author colors, instead of black, should be 0 for the red, 0 for the green, and you can see it's giving us blue right here. So now when I save this, notice these authors have turned blue, the author names. Now if I set this to, for example, 0, 255, 0, now we get green, and 255, 0, 0 will give us red. Now we can certainly mix these colors for other types of results. So red with some green is giving us kind of an orange, and if we add some blue, let's add 150, we get pink. So we can mix these up in any combination, 0 to 255, to get any color we want. Now, one thing it's important to know, that if you have, for example, a color that's closer to 0, it's going to be closer to black. So watch here, we've got pure red. If I set this to 100, now we've got somewhere between red and black. I can actually mouse over it using the brackets integrated development environment, and you can see a sample of the color. So, and if we got even closer to 0, 50, now we get even more black in the color. Now, if we have any color that's the same red, green, and blue, we get something on the gray scale, all the way up to white, which would be 255, 255, 255. And I changed that. You can't see these at all because they're white, which is the same color as the background. So let's set these as kind of a nice gray, like kind of a darker gray. So let's go with 125, 125, 125. And there we see we've got a nice gray for our authors' names. Now, RGB is not the only way you will see colors expressed. Colors will also be expressed using hex. Hex colors use the hexadecimal numbering system, which instead of going from 0 to 10, goes from 0 to 16. And 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 are represented by A, B, C, D, E, and F, respectively. So, for example, we could create, let's go ahead to our primary text color here, and let's set the color. Now this time, instead of using RGB, I'm simply going to provide an HTML color. HTML colors always start with pound, and let's do, for example, FF0000. So it's a similar type of pattern. The first two characters represent the red value. The second two characters represent the green value. And the last two characters represent the blue value. So in this case, if I did 0, 0, 0, 0, and then we did FF, which is the hex equivalent of 255, missing a 0 there, we're going to get blue. 0, 0, FF, 0, 0, you guessed it, we get green. Now the same kinds of rules apply. So the closer we are to 0, for example, if we do AA here, we get a darker green. Let's do 3, 3. That'll give us a green that's almost black. 6, 6 will lighten it up considerably. So now I don't have to have repeating digits. I could have, for example, 6, 3 here, and that gives us a color as well. There's actually a possibility of making 16.7 million different colors using this particular system. 255 cubed gives us that number. So here again, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 is black, and FF, FF, FF is white, and any combination where all the characters are the same gives us a shade of gray. For example, if we did 2F, 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 that gives us a shade of gray. So I'm going to actually set this simply for black, which is going to be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Now, let's set a background color for the div that holds all of our content. So the div is called courses. So I can actually identify it in the CSS by that ID using a pound sign and courses. So there we've got our courses. And let's set a very, very light gray. So here, if I use the RGB system, remember the closer we are to 255, 255, 255, the closer we're going to be to white. So let's say if we did 215, 215, and 215. Let's see how that looks. Oh, I used the wrong rule. We want background color. There we go. So notice here our div, and you can see kind of the spacing, gives us this kind of light gray. I'm going to lighten that up even more with like a 225, 225, 225. Depending on the screen you're watching this on, you may barely be able to actually see the gray. But now you can see the gray, and you can kind of see the margin space here around the gray. But now we've got a little bit of more visual interest in the page. All right, so now the next thing I'm going to do here is just apply a little bit of color to certain words to highlight them. So let's say, for example, we wanted to highlight the first paragraph of each of these descriptions. We want to do that by setting a specific color for the first paragraph. So we can actually do that with a class. I'm going to go in here to the first paragraph of each of these, and I'm going to set a class to first. Now, before you saw me set an ID, this is a little bit different than an ID, and I'll explain the distinction here in a second. Here's P class. This is the first paragraph, P class, and finally the last one. Now, this is not going to have any change yet because I haven't identified in the CSS what I want this class to be. So with courses, which identified a specific ID for the div, we used a pound. And now with first, because it's a class, we're going to use a period to precede that and put our rules here. So the essential difference between a class and an ID is within an HTML document, a ID is designed to be used only once. A class can be used multiple times, like I use it for all the first paragraphs. So now all of those first paragraphs have a class of first, and let's set the color on those to kind of a red-black. So a red-black, we'll use some red and some black. And the way we achieve that is, let's do like a 75. We don't need any green. We don't need any blue. And there you've got the red-black. And notice because it's a class, it's applied multiple times. So all the first paragraphs have that red-black RGB color applied. So in this segment, we've looked at colors in CSS and how to use colors within your web page.